Chapter 2 in the Norton Field Guide to Writing, Reading in Academic Context, provides us some excellent strategies for reading more critically and carefully. I'd like to take a few moments here to go over some of the strategies that the chapter discusses, especially the KWL method, which allows you to pre-read, read, and respond to a text more strategically and effectively. First, let's flash back to the first chapter of the textbook, Writing in an Academic Context. There are a number of goals that the textbook lays out that we are going to seek to achieve this semester, and two of them will be the focus of the analytical response to a text essay, which is what we're working on in this unit. And those goals are to, number one, show evidence of thoughtful consideration of the subject in your writing, and number two, respond to what others have said through your writing. And so this comes along with reading. Much of our writing is a response to what we have read. We join the conversation. We see what a certain writer has had to say about a subject. We think about their points, and then we add our voice, whether we agree or disagree or have a new idea. And so before we can write, we must read in an academic context. Reading in academic context is a situation in which you read more critically, carefully, and with a purpose in mind. We're not reading just to complete the reading. We're not reading just to get the gist of things. You actually want to process the information and begin to think about how you will write back in response to it. And so sometimes reading strategically means thinking about what you're going to read before you even read it. And so the KWL method is going to help us with that, where you preview the text to figure out what you want to learn, what you already know, and then you're able to think about your response. Other ways of reading more academically include annotating and taking good notes. And this is something that's going to help you not just in this course, but in all of your courses. So the KWL method, know, want, learn, emphasizes a way of reading that gets you to be more engaged with the text, to be an active reader. And so the first step is to say, what do I already know? So you preview the reading, whatever it is that you're going to be reading and then writing in response to. You outline to yourself what you already know or think about the main topic of the reading. And so we're going to take a look at an example in just a moment of the essay by Dana Boyd called WIKIPEDIA as a Site of Knowledge Production. And that is an essay that you will be summarizing and responding to in your next paper. And so your first step would be to take a look at it, to preview it according to some of the strategies that our textbook lays out, and then to jot down some notes on what you already know about the topic of the essay, which is Wikipedia, and how Wikipedia relates to knowledge. And then, after having previewed the essay and you've thought about what you already know, then you want to consider, well, what do I want to know more about? What do I hope that this article will teach me? So you consider the topic of whatever you're reading, your purpose for reading it. So what class is this for? What assignment is coming up? And then you jot down some notes on what you hope that this thing you're about to read might teach you. And there's no right or wrong answer here. And then after you read, you move to the final step, and you take an account of what you have learned. You can compare it to steps 1 and 2. What have you learned in addition to what you already knew? Did it change any of your previous thoughts? And then when you came up with some ideas for what you wanted to learn, did you learn those things? Were you surprised by the direction that the article went in? Did it teach you things you didn't even expect? Do you agree or disagree with points that the author makes? the final column of the KWL chart is where you reflect on what you've learned and what you think about that new information. And this is basically the building blocks for the next paper you're writing, in which you will summarize the content of what you read, and then you will respond to it with your thoughts and opinions focused on specific points that the author makes. And so writing a KWL chart for Dana Boyd's article is going to be an important part of preparing to write your next essay, and this module is going to guide you through that process. What you want to do first before you fill out your KWL chart is to preview the text. And so we're going to take a look at the title and consider, what initial ideas we have about what the article will be about based on that title. If there are headings, which there aren't in this reading, but often in your textbook or other readings, you might see subject headings that will preview for you the different points that the article might focus on. You can read the author blurb if one is available, and all of the essays in our textbook have one. And then it's always a good idea to just read the first paragraph, read it closely, get a sense of what this article is going to focus on. And so you want to think about the impressions that you get of the essay, what it's about, what you might learn from it before you read it in full. And this will allow you to fill out the first two columns in the KWL chart. What I know about the topic already, and you won't know what the topic is until you preview the article and see, okay, what's this author going to write about? And then what do you want to know? What do you hope or expect that this article might teach you? And so let's take a look at Wikipedia as a site of knowledge production and preview it a little bit. So right now I am in the ebook version of the Norton Field Guide to Writing. And so this is something that you can access to if you have a registration code that came with your textbook, or as you'll read more about later in this module, if you need to buy a registration code to access Inquisitive, it will also give you access to the ebook of the Norton. And so we're going to just preview this reading to get a sense of, what we're going to be learning more about, and then we can fill out the first two columns in the KWL chart before we actually get started, reading the whole thing. So first and foremost, I see my title and my author, and I want to think about what the title tells me. Wikipedia as a site of knowledge production. So this is suggesting that Wikipedia produces knowledge. Wikipedia teaches. And so I know that this article is going to focus on how Wikipedia helps to produce knowledge, presumably in the people who read it. And that might intrigue me, depending upon what thoughts I already have about Wikipedia or things that I've heard people say about it when it comes to knowledge, learning, education. And so I can, kind of sit and think of, okay, what do I already know about Wikipedia? What do I know about Wikipedia when it comes to learning new things or building knowledge? And that's something I can take notes on my KWL chart. Now, what else is there to see here? Well, we have a blurb about the author. Now, something to take note of with Dana Boyd is that she actually does not capitalize her name. Now, because of the style of the textbook, all of the authors' names are bolded, or I'm sorry, not bolded, put in all caps when they're introduced. But when we actually read her blurb, you'll see that it is in lowercase. That is a choice that she has made, somewhat like the poet A.E. Cummings. If you've ever read anything by him, he didn't capitalize his name either. If you're curious about why she's made that decision, you can Google it. But she is a professor who studies media, and her decision to not emphasize her name with capitalization has something to do with that. At any rate, what else can we learn about her right now? So she teaches at New York University. She is a researcher for Microsoft, and she's the founder and president of Data and Society Research Institute. So we can see here that she has connections to tech, to computers, and to research. that she is someone who deals with how data, information has to do with society. And we know that Wikipedia is a major source of information that depends upon the internet and people who seek to conduct research on the internet. And so we're seeing that she has expertise in this area. We see that she is an award-winning researcher, and we can find out what else she has written. She wrote a book called Hanging Out, Messing Around, and Geeking Out: Kids Living and Learning with New Media, Participatory Culture in a Networked Era, and It's Complicated: The Social Lives of Networked Teens, from which this evaluation is taken. And so the article we're reading is an excerpt from her book that came out in 2014. So we see that all of her books have something in common. They all deal with young people and how they live and learn in new media, which often refers to the internet and other digital technologies. So she's interested in how teenagers, high schoolers, early college students, how they interact with each other and how they interact with knowledge on the internet and other digital platforms. And so we can see, okay, that makes sense that she's writing about Wikipedia and knowledge. And so that gives us a clue that perhaps this is going to deal with something that you might have come across before, which is, how does Wikipedia have a role in your education, whether in schools or on your own? Should it have a role? What are your opinions, or what opinions have you heard before? So you can think about that as you write the K and W sections of your KWL chart. And then finally, we learn that she blogs and that, so she's clearly someone who is tapped into the world of technology and thinks and researches what role it has to play in our lives, and especially in the lives of teenagers. And so we have a better sense of who this person is that has written this article, and that might lead us to believe, that she has credibility to discuss this issue, and we can see where she's coming at the issue from the perspective of a researcher and someone who is interested in the potential of new media and is very interested in how young people are using it. One of our other previewing steps is to read the introductory paragraph, and so I will actually read this with you here. And that gives you one less paragraph you have to read when you read the essay. So let's see what she has to say when she opens up her essay. Wikipedia has a bad rap in American K-12 education. The de facto view among many educators is that a free encyclopedia that anyone can edit must be filled with inaccuracies and misleading information. Students' tendency to use the service as their first and last source for information only reinforces their doubts. Ignoring the educational potential of Wikipedia, teachers consistently tell students to stay clear of Wikipedia at all costs. I heard this sentiment echoed throughout the United States. All right, so let's break that down. Can we tell from this first paragraph what Dana Boyd's opinion is of Wikipedia and education? She tells us it has a bad rap. We don't yet know perhaps if she agrees with that. She tells us what she means by bad rap, that the de facto view, the most common view among educators, is that if you can edit Wikipedia, surely it's full of inaccuracy. Surely we cannot trust it. Now, does she agree with that? Well, if we look at that second to last sentence, ignoring the educational potential of Wikipedia, teachers consistently tell students to stay clear of it. So the first part of that sentence suggests that she believes there is educational potential in Wikipedia, and that maybe teachers telling their students to just stay completely clear of it isn't the best choice, that Wikipedia might not deserve its bad rap. And so now we have a sense of the ideas that Dana Boyd is going to explore in her article. She is going to challenge the de facto view among many educators that Wikipedia is bad, that Wikipedia is necessarily inaccurate. And she believes that there is an educational potential, and we can assume that her article is going to teach us about that educational potential. And so for the first two columns of your KWL chart, you want to consider, what do I already know or think about Wikipedia and about its reputation in education? Surely you have some experience with that. And then you might consider, well, what do I hope she teaches me? If she's going to dispel the notion that Wikipedia is unreliable, if she is going to discuss the educational potential of Wikipedia, what do I hope to learn from that? That would be what I would put in the second column on my KWL chart. Returning to the KWL chart, we can now fill out the columns, what I know and what I want to know. And these are really up to you. Your responses will be different than somebody else's. There is not a right answer here. This is meant to help you think about what you know and what you're going to read, and then to help you reflect on what you've read. And so you might consider for that first column what you already know or think about Wikipedia. What is it? How is it used? What are your personal experiences with it? Do you use it? What for? Do you trust the information that you find on Wikipedia, and why or why not? And because we know that Boyd is writing about Wikipedia and knowledge and Wikipedia and education, and we know that her position is that some teachers are overlooking the educational potential of Wikipedia, you might ask yourself, have I ever been told not to use Wikipedia? By whom, why, and what circumstances? And so in that first column in your KWL chart, consider, what do you already know about the topic of your reading? And this will help you to carry that knowledge with you into the reading as you hopefully learn new things. And sometimes your previous ideas might be challenged in some way or confirmed. And then in the second column, you want to consider, what do you want to know? What do you hope to learn more about when you read Dana Boyd's essay? What do you expect or hope that she will teach you about Wikipedia when it comes to knowledge and education? There are no right answers here. This column might not be as long as the first column. What you know versus what you hope to know, those are different things. And so this might be your best guess about what the article will deal with and what you expect it might teach you. After you've filled out the chart, it's time to actually read Dana Boyd's essay. Now, in Chapter 2, you learned about a number of different strategies aside from the KWL chart to help you read more actively, to take notes, to really process and think about what you're reading. And so I just want to remind you that it's a good idea to try some of those out as you're reading this essay. And so one thing you might consider is annotating your textbook. You can write in your book. It still has resale value. That won't change. It's expected that students will take notes in it. So if you're working with a paper copy, take notes. If you have the digital version and you prefer reading it, you can highlight in there too. So it's a good idea to highlight, take notes. You can write in the margins. You can put in sticky notes. I've given you some videos and guides on the module this week to help you with note-taking. And you might already have strategies that work well for you. But I think it is useful, especially if this is your first semester in college, to consider, you're going to be reading things for all of your classes. You're going to be trying to juggle a lot of information. So how can you read more effectively, to learn, more effectively? This is meant to help you in completing your assignments, rather than reading it over and over again because you've forgotten everything. That would be me. I would do that. Take the notes so you can return to them, and it makes the process a lot easier when you have to write a paper about what you've read. And so you can see here somebody else's ideas from the website strivefordthebest.com on how to annotate a textbook. So you could color code, right? Underline main ideas in red, examples in blue. Use highlighters for certain things. You can use certain colored sticky notes for other things. This person also suggests to give a short topic for each paragraph for easy reference. So to write that in the margins, what was this paragraph or these two paragraphs about? And that is very useful for the assignment we'll be working on. When you need to summarize the whole Dina Boyd article, it's useful to be able to go back and see, okay, that's what that paragraph was about. And that paragraph talked about this thing. So do consider trying out new ways to take notes to help you process what you're reading and be able to review it later more effectively. Another thing that our textbook suggests is to code your reactions. You could develop your own system, and you don't have to do any of these things. Just pick something that appeals to you. But this suggests having a code system so that when you're reading, you can place a check mark next to something that confirms what you thought already. And so when we think back to the KWL chart, you said, okay, this is what I know or what I think about the topic. And as you read, maybe Boyd says something that confirms what you already felt. And so you can check mark it. If you find something that completely contradicts what you previously knew, make an X. If you're puzzled by something or confused by something, some question marks, etc. And so if you want to do something like this, you might consider adapting a coding system that works for you so that when you're writing your paper later and it's time for you to move beyond summary and into responding to and analyzing what you've read, you can easily go back and see what were the things that surprised me. Maybe I can talk about that in my paper. Or what was something new and interesting to me, or contradicted what I previously thought. I could talk about that in my paper. And so really think about how you might read more actively and take notes or annotate or code what you're reading. I also recommend taking notes on a separate piece of paper where you can really write out your thoughts and react to the text. Consider what points did you agree or disagree with, and why. Nobody else has to see this but you, so you don't have to worry about grammar, complete sentences, but try to get your thoughts down as you're having them, right after you've read. And actually, these will be the things that go into that third column of your KWL chart as well. So you're considering, are you able to connect to any of the ideas that the author makes? Does it remind you of an experience of your own or something you've read elsewhere? What are your emotional reactions to something you read? Does it make you feel something? Do you appreciate the language? Do you personally identify with a story that an author tells? How are you reacting as an individual to what this writer has presented you with? Those are some of the things that you want to catalog in the final column of the KWL chart when you look at what you have learned. So after reading Boyd's article, come back to your chart, take notes on what you've learned, compare it to what you knew and what you wanted to know. Consider if your ideas that you had about Wikipedia and education were challenged or confirmed. What surprised you? What did you agree or disagree with? What simply seemed important, even if you don't know what to think about it yet? This chart is going to help you build your paper, right? This will give you a roadmap for some of the things that you might talk about in your paper. And you're going to be, reading and learning more about that throughout the module. But this, I think, is a really good first important step. And you can use this chart for anything you read. This is the only time I'm going to make you do it and submit it. But if you like it, if you find it useful, you might consider, keeping a copy of the KWL chart and filling it out for other things you read for your courses to help you take stock of what you know and what you learn. All right, so now it's time to get started. You can download the KWL chart on this module page, and we've already previewed the text a little bit together in this video, but you can also do so yourself and jot down some notes on what you know and what you want to know. These notes do not have to be in complete sentences. They can be bullet points, whatever you want to do, but this will be something you turn in. So start with the K and the W, then read the article by Dana Boyd, and then fill out the What I've Learned section. And then you'll go ahead and turn this in on Canvas. I look forward to reading your thoughts on this article.